commissioner and the town council have been involved in these processes, so just want to acknowledge all of that. I also want to do a shout out to the table in the back of the room. This is a group of wilderness managers, all work for the Forest Service around the country, different regions. They happen to be in Jackson for a series of meetings, and they heard about this, so they're going to join us. They were curious about the coordination and the communication. I love the fact you're here, that you're representing the public lands in our community, so thank you for being here. We won't take it personally if you feel like you have to go eat, so we're not expecting you to stay for the whole thing, but thank you for being here. I just want to step back very briefly. When I first ran for this office 4 years ago, it was the last time we had a vote on the 2% lodging tax. And there was a lot of discussion in our community about what are we doing with that, and a lot of discussion about recognizing, can we frame this a little bit differently? And since then, that legislation has changed, it's been modified a little bit. But what I'm really excited about is we're now at a place where we're beginning to really see the current Travel and Tourism Board really be very comprehensive as they look about marketing, and they begin to introduce discussion about management into that discussion. And I'm really proud of that. I mean, I think about the Friends of the Bridge of Teton grants both this year and next year, right? Those are the 2 budget years. The grant that they just gave to KHOL, local community radio station, and the Jackson Hole Wildlife Foundation, right? Is that the one? So those 3 grants to me really represent, and they're significant grants, represent a shift in terms of how we're thinking about tourism, management, marketing, and beginning to try to break out of silos. And so I'm really excited that after a year of work, I was asked to be part of the selection team when we got into looking at, when we sent out the RFP, and I'm learning a huge amount. This is not my gig. This is not something that I come to the table with any expertise in, other than as a community member. And I've learned a tremendous amount, and I've tried to come to any meeting that they invited me to, and have really learned a tremendous amount. And the thing that really strikes me is I'm getting a sense in these discussions that we're recognizing, as Chris had just said, I mean, I barely agree with myself 100% of the time. This plan, you're not going to agree with it 100%. And let's find where that common ground is. And I really appreciate that that seems to be the direction that we're going. And looking at ways to really respect our place as a community, I mean, our place as an ecosystem, the greater Yellowstone community, as well as our community of humans and our community of businesses in our community here. And how do those all relate together? To each other. So I'm really excited about that, looking forward to the discussion. As Krista mentioned, this is something that's going to be presented to the community. The elected officials are going to have a big role in this, and we'll be beginning to talk about that over the next year, beginning of the next year, but also as community members in terms of how we implement it. You'll see things up here that aren't necessarily what you would think about relative to marketing and tourism, like housing and transportation. This is trying to be a very comprehensive view. It's not a suggestion that everything you see around us, that the Travel and Tourism Board is going to take over and do that work. It's really recognizing that we're trying to break down the silos of a lot of this work that's being done in our community. So I'm really looking forward to that. Please push back. Please, I've had several discussions already with people that are curious about where this is going. Is this a shift? Is something changing? Please speak up, ask those questions, and push back. So with that, I'll turn it over to the team that's really been helping us, bringing some great expertise. What I really like about what they're bringing to this discussion are examples from all over the world about communities that are having similar kinds of discussions, and bringing some examples of what we can pick from and choose from, and then make it our own. So thank you, Selene.
Thank you, Arden. Good evening, everyone. It's so lovely to see all of you here. We're at a real critical juncture on this journey of 12 months together, building a shared vision for what you want to see of tourism in the Tetons. And what our role has been, Julie Klein and I's role, very privileged to co-lead a very large team that's not here with us, so would like to acknowledge that, of about 10 individuals, plus graduate research students that have helped with the research behind the planning. One of the things that we have observed through this process is that at the outset, there was a lot of reluctance. There was a lot of concern about tourism. There still is, and its future, and the impacts that it is having in this place. And so what we saw as our role being is to have listened and listened carefully to what all key stakeholder groups have had to say about what they want to see for tourism in the future. And so we had the enormous responsibility of ensuring that everything was brought into the process, respectfully processed, and that a balanced reflection of what all key groups are wanting to see for the future is reflected in this plan. As was noted already, whether you'll see everything that you'd like to see in the plan is probably not going to happen, because it has tried to reflect the cacophony of often divergent views and perspectives, aspirations that don't necessarily align. But we've tried our best to find that balance. And so what we're presenting tonight is really the scope, the wide scope of all these things that you have said are important to you and that need to be addressed in order to ensure that tourism really delivers on its potential promise. That is to ensure that the people are benefiting sufficiently from tourism, and that there is protection of the natural assets, these remarkable natural assets that you have that are not only national treasures but global treasures. You started this process in a very enviable position with a lot occurring. There, a very strong foundation, remarkable infrastructure, and an excellent collection of human talent. Dedicated public servants, public land managers included, strong business community, engaged residents, leaders from business, nonprofits that care so much about this place. And so we have taken all that you've said into consideration. We present here some highlights. The plan is much broader. We have very limited time together. So we picked off the kind of core of this plan to share with you and to get your feedback upon. Now, this journey together has been one of building trust, which is the foundation of collective action. Without trust, we have nothing, but we need to build trust. And so this 12 months has been that journey together. And the one way of building trust is really by defining a shared vision that we could all get behind, some shared values that we want to work toward together, and agreeing to some priority actions that we will work toward. And so this is the process that has tried to bring about these elements that are important for trust building. There's a lot more work that needs to happen, but I think we need to recognize all the effort, the time and energy that you've put in over these 12 months. And we hope that what you will see and what we'll discuss this evening is reflective of that. So what we'd like to do is to present these main elements to you of this plan, and that in the spirit of continued trust building, that we look at these elements and hear from you what you're thinking to ensure that the plan is even more reflective, we hope, of what is truly important to you. So we start this journey with an overview. So what is the Sustainable Destination Management Plan, and what is it aiming to do? It's a 5-year roadmap. So it's important to note that this is not a master plan. It's not a long-range planning. What it is, it's a medium-term blueprint that looks to sort of set in motion some key actions to ensure that tourism is heading toward a more sort of sustainable outcome over time. Through this process and all the inputs that you've provided, we've been able to define sustainability from your point of view. And the concepts that we kept hearing, the recurring theme around sustainability from community members was this concept of finding a balance among the various aspirations and needs of residents, businesses, and visitors, all toward ensuring that there's protection of the public lands, heritage, culture, and your economy long term. So that is what you've told us sustainability means to you. And I'm sure, there are many different opinions about this, but these were the recurring themes that we've sort of drawn from the conversation that we've had with you. It's important to note that the purpose of this plan is not to grow visitor numbers. It is to do something quite different. It is to craft a vision and actions that will ensure that tourism is being a positive force for residents, for the community at large. Continue to protect nature. There's a lot of protection already happening. You have a long trajectory of protection of the natural resource, but to build upon what has been done and to ensure that there is a thriving and vibrant economy long term. So we are in the fourth phase of this process. We have developed the plan, and tonight we'll look at key elements so you can tell us, you will help us to validate, revise, and strengthen it. The plan launch, as was mentioned by Krista, will come next year. We started this process with a comprehensive review of what the current situation is in regards to tourism. We took a quite holistic approach to this. And the situation analysis report, which has been completed and will be released alongside the final plan, really presents the most comprehensive baseline assessment that has been done about tourism and its impacts in the community. We looked at it way beyond the usual indicators that are used to measure success of tourism, which are the economic impacts. In addition to looking at the economic impacts, we looked at the impacts that tourism is having on quality of life, on the quality of visitor experience, on the natural environment, and also the enabling environment. These are these things that need to exist to ensure that tourism can take a more sustainable sort of direction here. And so it involves governance and also the institutional capacity of different entities to deliver on sustainability. We also produced 2 additional reports. We wanted to understand, although visitors are not around the table, if there were things that they were observing through their experiences at different popular attractions and sites that related back to stewardship. In doing this work in other destinations, we have found that when we analyze online travel reviews, oftentimes we're able to pick up on themes that may be related to stewardship. So we're able to see if the visitor is starting to notice changes in experience that have to do with how the destination is managed or not. So there is a report on this. We presented the findings in July. In addition to that, we also sought to get wide input from residents about their perceptions toward tourism through a resident survey. So bringing together the situation analysis report with these 2 additional reports, we were able to really form a comprehensive snapshot. All the main ingredients of the plan were developed by you and many other community members. This slide presents the level of involvement throughout the process. We had 4,777 residents respond to the survey. There was a 75% completion rate, and it wasn't a short survey. For many of you that may have taken it, you may remember this. This is remarkable. There's a steering committee that has guided this process. The steering committee consists of representatives from all key groups: business sector, also public land managers, nonprofits, and the list goes on. Very well-rounded. They met on a monthly basis, have reviewed all the key outputs along the way. And so this is tremendous contribution from 18 leaders that have followed this process from start to where it currently is. In March, we conducted about 8 focus groups. We had about 150 people come into these focus groups. And through these focus groups, you helped us to validate the findings from the situation analysis report. And you also helped us to rank those issues that were most important to you that the plan needed to address. We conducted interviews, about 38 of these. In June, we had 2 full-day visioning and planning sessions in which we went back to those focus areas, those 8 focus areas, and we started to develop with you initiatives to address those areas. So all that you see around you and on these flip charts came from community members. It wasn't Julie or I or the team that is behind us and with us that developed these. These are your initiatives. The details come from your thoughts and ideas. There has been tremendous interest as well among the wider community. Many of you here, I'm sure, have signed up to receive project updates. Nearly 2,000 people have done so. We reviewed over 7,000 TripAdvisor online reviews for 25 of your most popular attractions and sites. We, subsequent to June, continued working with you on these initiatives. So the details behind these initiatives we developed together. We organized 12 of these sessions and had about 50 different leaders come into them to help us add the details needed to these initiatives. We've also had community meetings like the one tonight, and you see the details here, not only here in Jackson, but we also organized meetings in Driggs to ensure that we got a regional perspective and input as well. And so this demonstrates the remarkable level of involvement of the community into this plan. So it's truly community plan. There are 8 main stewardship goals that connect to these 8 focus areas that I was mentioning. So these focus areas include education and communications, which has a corresponding goal to ensure that there's like a common understanding of shared responsibility among residents, businesses, and visitors. The second area focuses on visitor flow management. This is how visitors are moving through the destination and ensuring that there's alignment of the needs and aspirations of residents, businesses, and visitors throughout all lands. And what do we mean by all lands? We mean across jurisdictions, public lands, the county, the town itself, so that there is cohesion and coordination occurring. And these bottlenecks are where people are concentrated and where there may be these conflicts arising in use of recreational areas, for instance, that those are resolved over time. Workforce recruitment and retention, huge issue, national crisis, destination after destination, including this one, and you've all spoken about the importance of ensuring that there's increased stability of the tourism workforce. Workforce housing, which connects the workforce actually, and recruitment. And for housing and transportation, which you see down here as goal 5, there's a lot of work happening in these areas. And so what this plan has done is ensured and involved all the key leaders and organizations that have work in these areas. And we've aligned this plan to cover the small gaps in those plans, looking at the intersection of tourism with these issues. So there's no duplication, but actually this plan is looking to amplify some of the actions, priority actions included in these plans, and where there are gaps, to fill some of those gaps, where you and others felt the opportunities were prime. Climate action. Again, another area where there's a lot of work building on what exists to further reduce climate risk and enhance the resilience of the destination. Monitoring and reporting. Cohesion here across all lands and all communities. So there's a lot of monitoring happening. It's fragmented, but it doesn't cover the full sort of scope of what needs to be looked at in order to understand the full impacts, good and bad, of tourism in this place. Lastly, governance, which underpins everything. And this is a goal that aims to focus on ensuring that there is a structure in place that will support work, collaborative work, for implementation of the plan. So these are the goals and areas that define the full scope of the plan. Under each of these goals, there are between 2 and 4 initiatives, a total of 25 initiatives in the plan. And this is what you find around the room here. I'm going to turn it over to Julie now, who will lead us through the more dynamic and action-oriented part of our conversation, because we're going to roll up our sleeves and do a little bit of work and make sure that you're giving us input.
Okay, Sonny just mentioned this, that the Sustainable Destination Management Plan is going to include this in the first round. So this plan is something that's going to be a continuous process. We're going to be delivering the draft plan to the community the end of December, and the intention is that if there's a mechanism, as been discussed several times, where it has reevaluation. It gets connected to other plans and programs that are going to be evaluated on an ongoing basis. And it will continue to build in input from the community. It's critical for that process, continuing with tonight and then going on into the future. So you are not going to see this in the work that you're looking at tonight. We really kind of tried to boil it down so that we could be efficient with your time to get some good feedback. Each of the initiatives underneath those 8 goals that are around the room, we have framed to have objectives, priority actions, potential resources, partner organizations, an implementation timeline, key performance indicators, and also addresses where all these different focus areas overlap. There is a lot of efficiency that can be found not only from existing plans and programs like for transportation and housing that are happening in the community, but within the Sustainable Destination Management Plan. So the plan is intended to look at all those different things, making sure that we are, again, not trying to reinvent, because there's never enough resources and time, right? We want to be really mindful of that. So before we get into giving you this task, I want to pause for a second and see if there's questions about what we presented so far. We know it's the end of a long day for many of you, and we don't want to put you to sleep before we ask you to get up and kind of give us your opinions. Any questions or thoughts before we jump forward? Okay. Doesn't mean that you can't ask later. So, the goals and strategic initiatives. I'm going to do a lightning round of what you're going to see around the room, and then we're going to ask you to get up and do some work with these little dots, because everybody likes to work with dots, right? Sure they do. Okay. 8 goals. The first one is around communications and engagement. And it's building a platform to continue the engagement process, both in the ownership of this process and the plan and its implementation for you as residents, but also where does that interface come with visitors? How can you model behavior? How can you understand a little bit more how to protect this amazing place that you live and work in, but also convey that message to your visitors? It's going to look at strategies that not only will be managed and implemented on the beginning of the process, maybe from the Travel and Tourism Board, the Chamber of Commerce, but also through businesses and other organizations and entities. It's a collective process. It's been said a lot, and it's really intended and inherent to this program and this plan. This is the beginning of a journey where the community is going to look a little differently, ideally, at marketing communications. It's important to consider that. What that looks like is yet to be determined, but that is the commitment that the community has made by entering into this process. It's a balanced approach where they're together. Management and marketing are now being considered together. The second goal is looking at the needs of residents, businesses, and visitors across all lands. We've talked about that. It's not only recreational lands, but it's also, other parts of the community. There's some language in here that's a little wonky, but it's looking at where are capacity issues, both good and bad. Where can visitors be put into other places? Where can you be monitoring and measuring? And this interfaces with some of the other goals, and looking at managing these spaces better. The really cool part is this project has created another mechanism in which the community can work more deeply with public land managers, the Forest Service, the Park Service. Those agencies have really good methodology and really good framework around data collection, management platforms, and things like that. And they're very excited to start to work more broadly within the destination and the greater community on sharing those resources and using those more for planning and resource allocation. So I'm going to ask you to weigh in on that one. The third one is the stability of the workforce. Tourism and otherwise, right? It's a big issue here. Where can the community be working more collectively and creatively around building workforce capacity, both recruitment and retention? There's a lot of things out there. Again, we're raising through this process the first round of initiatives. The intention is that this will build on itself, and you'll continue to look at more creative approaches to work together as a community to make sure the workforce is not only happy but stable. The fourth one is to advocate and support solutions for housing. Workforce might not be workforce, might just be housing when we come with the final plan, but that's tied very, very heavily to a workforce shortage and workforce strain, right? Housing's a big deal. As been said by Selene and other folks, there is a lot happening in this community around housing. You have 30 years of programs and resources being allocated towards housing for people that are critical to the community. Your teachers, your emergency responders, your healthcare workers, your government employees, all sorts of people that are really critical to the economy here and the livelihood of the community. And really looking at this. Super exciting to see the spet tax and how much, 50% of that spet tax that you all just voted on is going to housing. That's really incredible. You don't see that in many communities. So cheers to you guys, and this is a really great building block for this. Again, we work really, really closely with folks that are leading in housing, not only the Housing Authority, but all the NGOs that are doing good work around housing, to make sure that this plan is a complement to that, and it doesn't draw resources away from something that needs resources. Transportation is very similar. Worked very, very closely with the START bus folks, the county, the Joint Powers Transportation people, many of you in the community, to look at where are more resources here, and again, where can the tourism industry, both private sector and other folks, play a more significant role in supporting and utilizing transit. This ties a lot to the climate action goal, right? You got to reduce climate impacts. It looks a lot to transit and mobility. So this covers a couple of different things, but very important. It came up pretty resoundingly when you look at 5.2, this mobility app, that pre-trip planning for not only visitors and more user-friendly, tools for residents would make it easier to use transit a little bit more. The START bus, fortunately, is already invested in developing an app, and they're going to have a first generation out by the end of the year. The intention is that this process will hopefully build and resource that a little bit more so it can be a little bit more broadly applied to other than just transit planning. Some really just deep discussions about, and there's a study that's going to be happening to look at getting transit out to key attractions, the airport for sure, Grand Teton National Park. How can these solutions build off existing plans and programs and get people out of single occupancy vehicles and into other transit options that reduce traffic congestion, improve the quality of living here and the quality experience for your visitors? Climate risk. We've talked about this a couple different times. There's some goals that have happened here. It's been since back in the, around 2009, 2010, there was a 10 by 10 energy reduction goal, a 20 by 20 goal. You've been kicking this around for a very long time and have a lot of resources allocated towards energy conservation, climate risk mitigation and adaptation. And there's been some recent resources allocated to that to really get to some bigger goals. This raises that profile in the community, and again ties into a lot of the other goals. And the intention here is this really starts to look at this a little bit more holistically and a little bit less siloed, which has been, I think, some of the issues in the past. And then monitoring impacts. Selene spoke to this. There's some great detail and data that's coming out, but again, it's very segregated, and there's not a collective effort to create and collect data. And that's really important to not only, again, improve, enhance whatever the positive impacts of tourism and tourism-related data and metrics, and look at where the community can have very solid information to look at where other things need to be evaluated and where investments can be made. And then lastly, of this initial round of goals and the Sustainable Destination Management Plan is this: where's this going to go? Where's this football going to live when it gets passed over to the community? How can it get implemented? How can it be resourced going forward? And where can that ownership be taken to make sure that the stakeholder engagement process continues? And again, all these different organizations and programs and plans continue to be brought into the conversation. So again, there's a little bit less silo, there's a lot more efficiency, and the destination can move forward in the vision of being this amazing place to live, continue to preserve and protect that, and continue to support a thriving tourism economy. So that was hopefully helpful in this process. So what we're going to do now, this is this part where you get up and move around, is there's green and yellow dots on your table. What we have on the wall is the key initiatives for each of those 8 goal areas and the objectives that we're trying to accomplish through passing along this plan to you. And we're going to ask you to take a look at them. Many of you already walked around the room to look at those. If you feel like this is hitting the money and you think it's framed correctly, it is clear to you, you think it'll be clear to other members in the community, stick a green dot next to it. Anywhere on the little flip chart next to it. If you feel like it still needs a little bit more work, use a yellow dot. If you have additional ideas, thoughts, things you want to be considered, again, in these 8 primary goal areas with these initiatives and objectives, please write them on the flip charts next to it. There's some flip charts with some markers right there. Please use those to add some additional thoughts. Myself, Selene, Catherine, Tim in the back, Krista are all going to be around to answer questions, help clarify as you look at all of these. But please give us your feedback, flag us down if you need more clarification. And again, you can write on the flip charts if you need to, but use these dots to kind of give us a little bit more feedback into the process. So before we break, and we're going to do this till you're done. You need a cocktail, you're ready to go home, whatever. But before we do that, is there any questions or thoughts that you would like to share before we ask you to just kind of jump in a little bit more for us? Yep.
I don't see in their mitigation initiatives for damage that's already been done to our environment.
And specifically,
water quality, erosion, the aquifer,
Okay, so
wildlife.
So backing up a little bit, this is formed from feedback that we got through the resident sentiment survey, all engagement and feedback from members of the community. Water quality was definitely brought up, but it wasn't necessarily brought up as, top of the list. The good news is that some water quality resourcing just passed as part of your SPET. So to that point, let's capture that on, why don't we do it on number 7? If you want to capture it on number 7. Tim? Yep.
Yeah, and just to add that one of the initiatives that you'll see here is businesses being trained to be more sustainable in their operations, and of course that includes not only conservation of water, but water quality considerations as well, so that's embedded in some of the actions.
Yeah, but not so specific to water or whatever. So to that point, mark it down, because I think, this is a continuous process. So ideally, you go through this round, and then additional initiatives get brought up. So figure out a place to jot it down. If you don't see one that makes the most sense, you just write it down. We're going to capture it all anyway. So point well taken. Thanks for the feedback. Yep.
GW being a third-party provider to this community effort, I've been involved with similar efforts with focus groups that have been created. I've seen focus groups been planted with agenda-minded individuals in these focus groups. Was that mitigated in this process? People want to get on focus groups because they have an agenda. Did you sense any of that at all in your initial process with creating the focus groups?
We can both respond to it. No, I mean, basically what we did was we had, the focus groups that we put together were, like, one focus group was invited government employees and elected officials. Another one was members of the non-governmental or NGO community, members of tourism product providers, et cetera, et cetera. So people were invited to give feedback. I think people came with certainly a mindset, but I guess my response to that is that I don't think that people came as like a mole or anything like that. I think it was a very open and transparent process. And we continue to look at, as you could see from that slide before, creative ways to make sure we brought in as many voices as possible. We started this process with every member of the community had at least 2 opportunities to engage at a minimum, which was the resident sentiment survey, and now actually 3 community meetings, because every time we've been here, we've done a community meeting. So the good news is that the mechanism of the process made it so that whether you were affiliated with an organization that might have been invited to a focus group, you still had an opportunity to come and openly participate. So that's my 2 cents, but I'll let Selene respond.
Like at the outset of the process, we also did extensive stakeholder mapping. So we looked at all the kind of key groups that needed to be around the table. And there was like systematic sort of listing of all the key organizations that needed to be brought into the conversation, including residents, through the opportunities that Julie just outlined. So the design of the sessions was based on like what the topics that we were covering. So for instance, like in the case, as Julie mentioned, of like the focus group being more designed and had sort of the business community, because we were looking at the findings from the situation analysis report that were related to the business community. So they were the kind of best place to like help us ensure that we got things right, and we did the same. So like the community saw all of this as well, and you gave us your input as well. So the stakeholder mapping really helped to guide this, and each of the sessions were designed to ensure that we had equal input from everyone, and this was done systematically.
Fair enough, thank you.
Sure. Back. Oh, actually, sorry, there's a gentleman. Yeah, right here first. Thank you.
Maybe my expectations were unrealistic, but my understanding was that this GW group had worked with other resort communities in trying to solve similar problems. So I thought we were going to see more case studies of here there's a group of 6 comparable communities. This is the framework they used. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. And if you're going to use these approaches, these are some of the key things to know to promote success of other measures. I'm not hearing any of that. It just seems to be a lot of listening and then combining what everybody said to you and putting it in a nice PowerPoint. I think everybody in this room we know a lot of the viewpoints here. I think we need a little more guidance on some concrete measures of what works and what's working elsewhere.
So we did extensive research on this, and in July, when we came in to look at these initiatives, the start of developing these initiatives, we brought into that discussion a very comprehensive set of examples of like good practices on each of these like 8 focus areas from other destinations. And that was used as an input to sort of guide conversation. So all the participants of those sessions used the good practices that were outlined to sort of consider. So some of that thinking is in fact reflected in the initiatives. So we did look at this. Another thing that we looked at as well was the scope of the plans. So there are many destinations, for instance, Vail, Sedona, Breckenridge, Park City, and the list goes on, that are a little bit further ahead. And so we looked to see as well what the scope of their plans were, to understand what the issues were that they're looking to address, what are the initiatives that they have ongoing, in these plans. And a lot of the examples came from what is being practiced currently in these destinations. So that was a key input to the discussions in July. We can share with you. And I don't know, do we have that on Teton County Engage? Like that handout? Yes, so on Teton County Engage, it should be online because when we came in July and did the community meetings, we had folks online as well. And so we made sure to sort of publish the good practices so everyone had an opportunity to sort of review, to consider them, to figure out what made sense, like be inspired by some of the good things that may be happening and are relevant and applicable to this space.
Yeah. And furthermore, that library of all those resources is now in the hands of the TTB and other folks to use as a reference point going forward as you start to look at how are you going to try to implement these things. So, yes.
Yeah, I don't see any timelines for analysis of success and failures. And any data, any piece of data that is presented to me, I need metrics. If we don't put numbers and dates and where we have failures and where we have successes as communities, it's just words.
Yeah, that's built into the entire plan and will be evaluated. Well, we're just trying to give you a snapshot. We have an hour and change with you tonight. So this is just, we're trying to keep engagement around the core components of the plan for now. And the full plan will be delivered in December, and it has it in there. So.
No, I don't believe that's where we need to go in this discussion, because all you're showing me here is input from various groups. And I don't see, the only thing I saw in terms of numbers, how many people did you ask and how many people were engaged? And I just don't find this at all of interest.
So we presented in March when we came in, so it's been sort of 12 months, so we've broken up the process into different components. When we came in March, we shared the highlights of the main findings from that situation analysis report, comprehensive, over 150 pages, filled with metrics. So all those areas that we covered, we looked at economic impact, quality of life, impact on the environment, the kind of foundations for success that includes governance, also the institutional capacity of organizations. All of that is in that comprehensive baseline assessment.
Right, but right here, I need metrics
So
and numbers. And it
that
doesn't.
report
Can I say something real quick?
Please.
So just to put a little perspective on things, you guys, on election day in Teton County, there were 4,944 ballots cast, which is almost the number of people that filled out the survey. There were a total of 10,000 ballots cast in the general election this year, but the fact that almost the amount of people that filled out this survey was the amount that were cast on voting day this year, in like a grassroots effort survey, like yes, this was widely funded by our tax dollars, like is in my mind super impressive. And I agree, like I need to see metrics too, and I think that's a pretty impressive metric, honestly.
It's not on there.
Well, I mean, you can Google it too. So,
Okay.
but yeah.
The plan will be,
anyway.
so,
To your point, we could do better at managing expectations of what to expect here tonight, but to forward thinking and to manage your expectations down the line, the plan that will be publicly available will have 200 plus pages in one situational analysis report, for example, where you will find the backup metrics from which we are working.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for your question, though.
Yeah, it's
I
wonderful.
really appreciate it.
Also, the complete findings of the survey itself, which is that separate report that I showed, plus the third report, which is on the analysis of online travel reviews. So a lot of data, consolidated, analyzed, brought together. Now, this serves as baseline. The recommendation is that you need to update this over time, right? But you have that baseline as starting point.
Okay, thanks.
all right, let's get you moving. Thanks for the questions. Please get out, give us some feedback on these. Flag us down if you have questions. Thanks.
And I'm like, I want to slug it all the way down, and then I would be okay.
Hey.
I'm Sophia. I'm a reporter with the local paper.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Catherine Brackenridge.
Wonderful. Wonderful to meet
I
you.
don't think we've ever met in person, but this is really fine with confidence and accountability.
Yeah.
Sophia's with the Jacksonville News and Guide covering this, and when next.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for introducing. I can. I have like a list of questions. I don't know who is best to. I don't want